I've been programming in Unity C# for the last 10 years, but I've been drawing for close to 30. Somewhere around here is a binder full of all the Gen 1 Pokemon I drew back in middle school, and if there's one thing I've learned in all that time, it's that talent is a dirty word. One of my art instructors used to regale us with stories about how he could teach 4-year-olds how to draw, or how he could teach color theory to the colorblind. And these weren't just idle boasts or humble brags. He actually brought receipts showcasing the artwork that his students had made. This is a guy whom college professors and industry professionals would travel far and wide to study under. The key was that he always taught art in the same way, whether you were young or old, novice or expert. He had a system, and that system is one that he'd inherited from classical traditions, dating back hundreds, or in some cases even thousands of years. And though I only spent a short time with him myself, it was truly life-changing. Arguably, the most important lesson I took away from that class was that art is a learnable skill just like any other, and anyone can draw, if you have a good system in place. I hear this all the time from students and from peers about how they can't draw, that they just don't have the genes or the talent for it or whatever. I especially hear this all the time from programmers. There's even a term for it, programmer art. And while some of them might recognize at a conceptual level that art might be something that's within their grasp, the reality is, most of them just never bothered to even try. Or they've tried, but they had a bad system in place, or bad teachers that failed them at some point. Still others are under this hypnotic delusion that art is some mystical sorcery that you're either born with or you're not.
How do you draw so well?
Practice.
It must be an innate gift. A gift from God.
It's practice.
I'll never understand how people are so talented. Truly a mystery.
No, it's practice.
Sorry, the patron deity just doesn't favor you today, and you've been cursed to suck at stick figures for the rest of your life, as though you're a participant on some Magic the Noah game board show. Sure, trait openness is absolutely a real thing within the realm of personality psychometrics, and that can be partly influenced by one's genetic makeup, which in turn can impact your openness and creativity. But that's not what I'm talking about here. Creativity and design are fundamentally two different domains. One has to do with coming up with ideas, the other has to do with how you execute them. Coming up with ideas in the first place is your problem. I have a video talking all about how to do that, which I'll link up here once it becomes available. You can have crap ideas, but be an incredible draftsman, and maybe you become an illustrator of medical textbooks and industrial engineering manuals. Or alternatively, maybe you have awesome ideas, you just don't have the skills to actually execute that vision yourself. So maybe you become an art director, or an editor, or a critic. Two opposite extremes along a two-dimensional axis.
I don't like food, I love it.
You get that, right? Creativity and draftsmanship have nothing to do with one another. The only reason we think they do is because society values people who are competent at both. Artists who can simultaneously generate ideas, and who can also execute on that particular vision. Example I used to give to my students was that let's suppose that your creative vision, the thing that you want to generate most in this world, is Arnold Schwarzenegger riding naked on a unicorn through a field of flowers with leprechauns and gnomes dancing around. Well, you're never going to be able to execute on that vision if you can't even draw a circle. I've known some incredibly open-minded and creative programmers who are absolute wizards on the keyboard, but who couldn't draw their way out of a paper bag. People who could work magic on the back end, engineering tools and systems, but had to rely on art assets and grayboxing front-end UI. And to someone like me, who started off as an artist with no knowledge of how to program, that looked impossible too. But ultimately, it's, as the kids these days say, a skill issue. So the first thing you need to do, if you're listening to this right now, and you're someone who constantly complains that they can't draw, will never be good enough at art, don't have the innate talent or the ability for it, the first thing you need to do is to stop treating art like it's some goddamn arcane sorcery that only people with a midichlorian count of over 9,000 can possibly attain. Alright? Telling you, as somebody who's trained artists myself, including very young kids, that is complete bullshit. Aesthetic preferences might be subjective, and beauty may be in the eye of the beholder, but good design has rules and structures and systems in place that have been known and studied and passed down for literally thousands of years. All of this postmodernist crap about woo-woo feelings and relativity and my truth for the last century, all of this talk about everybody gets a participation trophy, has caused entire generations to forget about that, to forget about standards, to forget about quality, to forget about personal responsibility and hard work.
As you may have noticed, I always like to present a carefully reasoned argument.
But you, as a programmer, are well attuned to dealing with rules and systems and structure. I promise that even you too can learn art. I've personally taught students who are far worse than you, with far less natural ability. I guarantee it. If you want proof of that, just think of any artist whom you respect and admire. Someone you think has innate talent and was blessed by Apollo himself. Michelangelo, for instance. Not that Michelangelo. That Michelangelo. Well, Michelangelo didn't know how to draw when he was a baby, did he? So at some point, between birth and becoming Michelangelo, he acquired the skills to learn how to draw and paint and sculpt. He just committed to doing the work and had good teachers along the way. In fact, my professor, whom I mentioned at the start of this video, posted a quote by Michelangelo on the wall of his studio, which read, "If people knew how hard I worked to gain my mastery, it wouldn't seem so wonderful at all." Again, this is the great Michelangelo that we're talking about here. The guy who sculpted the David and painted the Sistine Chapel, one of the most celebrated artists of all time, who still suffered from imposter syndrome and feeling like his work wasn't anything special, that it was merely the byproduct of hacks and trickery. That same Renaissance master still thought his work wasn't all that hot, still attributed his success down to hard work and skill, rather than innate talent or natural ability or divine fortune. Michelangelo was classically trained in long-standing rules and principles of design, passed down through art institutions from time immemorial. Things that are still accessible to you and me to this day, if you know where to look. Or let's take another example. Just like people invoke Einstein as the go-to smart person, so too do they invoke Picasso as the go-to art person. Most people know of Pablo Picasso for things like Guernica or Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, with these funky contorted cubist compositions and, "Oh, he's such a genius. How did he come up with this stuff?" In truth, the secret sauce behind his brilliance is he was classically trained. Here's a piece he made when he was 15 years old. You might still look at that and think he's clearly got natural talent to do that at 15, when I could spend my whole life working and never achieve anything half that good. And sure, it's a great piece by any standard. But the part you probably didn't know is that his father was also a classically trained artist who taught him since childhood in the same style and principles and rules of design, which is why you see all these guidelines and what are termed coincidences, where elements converge and point to one another, and all this structure underneath. All the work he did on the back end, creating a framework for himself, and then just injecting forms and color into it. As programmers, you understand the importance of code architecture, abstraction, composition, and encapsulation. Well, we have all that in art too. Architecture in the form of golden rectangles and grid armatures. Abstraction in terms of simplifying complex forms down to basic ones like boxes, cones, and cylinders. Composition in how we arrange those elements relative to one another. And encapsulation in terms of framing and pointer elements. What makes Picasso a master is he's just better at hiding it than you or I. In fact, all the great masters of history across all cultures do this. One of my favorites is Mondrian, who, after a while, just takes the grid furniture and starts to see how far he can push it before you notice. And then, once you see how the trick is done, you can start to understand why such simple pieces that seemingly anyone can make are so captivating and so valuable. Alphonse Mucha is another great example with his Art Nouveau style, where you can really see the structure and the systems at play behind his work. In this case, hiding the underlying grid with flowing arabesques and curves and circles that aren't just random. They still follow certain rules and patterns, but bring a more organic and playful spirit and elegance to the piece. It's only once we start getting to Marcel Duchamp and his parody art that we start to stray away from this tradition and fall into the modern art movement of, art is whatever I say it is.
The truth is what I say it is.
Which is ironic because Duchamp himself was also classically trained. Duchamp originally meant these pieces as a joke, to try and make a point about sanctity and tradition. But unfortunately, some people took it too far, and now this is where we find ourselves.
You're so ugly you could be a modern art masterpiece.
But just to bring this all home, you're a programmer. You're used to systemic thinking, which is a good thing. Because unlike what you've been told, art and design is a system. It's got structure to help make it feel solid, just like you'd use solid principles to write clean, organized code. You know that code is made up of symbols, things like variables and methods and keywords. Or even if you're still a novice programmer, you at least know writing has symbols in terms of the alphanumeric characters. Well, art has symbols too, and I don't just mean abstract symbolism, but fundamental shapes. Lines, squares, spheres, etc. Just like you build up code in modules through composition, so too do you build an art piece up through modular composition of those basic elements in what's known as the artist's alphabet, which I'm working on a video all about that as well, and I'll pin a link to it once it becomes available. And then, just like how you'd use recursion and scaling to add complexity and depth to your algorithm, you can recursively repeat these base elements throughout a piece to give it rhythm and harmony, and hide a lot of that abstraction away, making it feel more complex and detailed than it really is. So hopefully that dispels some of the mysticism behind art, putting it squarely within the realm of something you're capable of. It isn't just some wishy-washy voodoo feel-good stuff.
That comes later.
Learning to draw is about understanding a few fundamental concepts, and then repeating those concepts through a process known as constructive drawing. Artists don't draw what they see. That's far too complex. If we tried to do that, you'd be sat here forever, outlining every single individual molecule along an infinite fractal, and nobody has time for that.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Instead, they abstract out what they see, simplifying it down, and then iterate over that design until they get the result they want, building up in layers over time, working from big to small, broad to detailed. A master artist can bend and break the rules, but you first have to know what they are. And creativity comes from finding new and interesting combinations of those same base elements that have never been seen or tried before. Kind of like sorting through a massive dictionary or hash set, looking for a unique entry. I could go on about this topic endlessly, but I'll leave you to process that for now. If you liked the video and found it helpful, why not help us out in return by booping the like button and sharing it out with others. In the description, you'll also find a link to our Discord with channels for you to post your own pieces and network with fellow creatives. Or, if you'd like to support this channel and help combat the stereotype of the starving artist, please consider donating to us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Those who back us at the Acolyte level and above can get in-depth personalized feedback on their pieces to help boost their skills. If you'd like to know more about the principles of good design and how to apply them, check out this playlist appearing on your screen right now. Or maybe you know somebody who's struggling with the inverse problem of being an artist who sucks at code, in which case, show them this video right here. Until next time, I'm Marushi Adark of Circuit Studios. Take care. And I managed to make it through the entire video without mentioning AI once.
Exactly.